And I didn't have a backup plan. There were no backup plans. My only plan was to go to become a SEAL. And I think if you have a backup plan, it's usually looks a little bit better once you get through some struggle because they're hammering you. You might say, oh, maybe I should have been a pilot or something else. But in SEAL training, the visualization and thinking about pursuing a goal, like for instance, if you ever wanted to do a triathlon, um, all you if you just thought about it and visualized it a little bit, you would do it for sure. You'd have to want it, of course. But for me, for birds, what happened is every day, I made sure I did that. Came back to my barracks room, my rack there. I was thinking, okay, today was tough. It was a tough day, but it wasn't as tough as I thought it would be. Buds was much easier for me than I thought it would be because I did all that visualization and thinking about how hard it was going to be. And I love this state of flow. And, Bach, Beethoven, Mozart used a state of flow. Sometimes they'd lock themselves in a room for 2 or 3 days, not eat or drink water, and they'd paint or they'd compose music, and they're in the state of flow. And I was working with bankers, teaching the state of flow where first thing you do is you clear off your desk, you turn off your phone, you don't let anyone come in your door, and you get completely obsessed with what you're doing. And you don't and that way, if you have 1 hour of being in state of flow, it might equal to 4 or 5 hours of constant disruptions and everything else that might prevent you from focusing on your goal of what you're pursuing.
Well, welcome everybody back to the Sean Trey Show. I've got an awesome guest here, and we actually had this conversation before, but due to some technical difficulties, life threw a wrench in the works, and we're back here to do it again because that's what happens sometimes. But can you introduce yourself and tell people who you are and what you do?
Sean, thanks for having me, and it's good to be back with you. My name's Don Mann, and I'm a retired Navy SEAL and adventure athlete, and now I'm hosting a couple TV shows and writing books and doing talks around the country.
That's awesome. Well, I'm just so glad to have you. And it was super enlightening to talk to you because I think one of the things that everyone's life has a series of challenges, right? The thing that's interesting is that special forces deal with challenges every day. You know, your baseline is what a lot of people experience much less often. Today, I had a motorcycle accident on the way home. Wasn't bad, but I was driving with my family. Front wheel caught on a rock, and I did everything I could to keep my balance and kept us from spilling. And just, I would like to say it was me staying cool headed, but I think it was just breathing through it, understanding where the bike was at, where I was at, and I kept us up. And I would like to say I handled it well, but I could have handled it better, And I think that one of the things that I'm fascinated by is like my friends that were special forces, there is this cool, calm demeanor when stuff hits the fan and just, you don't know what it might be. There's always challenges in our lives, but I want to ask you because you've lived through some like the most intense environments a human can experience. What does tough actually mean to you beyond what people see on the surface?
Well, thanks for saying that, Sean. What you were saying about your motorcycle near accident where you almost crashed and you got calm under everything that was going on. You were calm. Um, I noticed like maybe a few years after being in the teams that I started feeling that same thing happen. Whenever there was chaos or something terrible, it felt like things were slowing down and I felt
Mm.
so calm and relaxed. And even though other people might be panicking and stress and shooting or whatever everywhere else, I always liked the sense of calmness that came. And I think that happens through, well, maybe not in your case, but I think usually what happens is just through intense training because
Mm.
you go through this training and you go through these scenarios. Scenario based training is what we call it. And so if you're practicing like an assault and all of a sudden the opposing forces are assaulting you, and that's what you're doing for training, and you're going through it over and over and over. When it really does happen, it's like you've been there before. And now
Mm-hmm.
you're just doing it once again, but this time it's for real. It's not a big leap to doing it for real. So I think that in the military and law enforcement, the scenario based training really helps desensitize yourself to the chaos and the mass confusion that takes place in when terrible things happen. And it desensitizes you in a good way that you don't lose control of your fine motor skills, of your reasoning, your logic, and you can act with a clear head. Because if you lose control and you get all stressed out and everything goes to pieces, the situation is going to go bad. It's going to go from bad to worse. And you're really in control of it not going from bad to worse. So if you let your emotions get the best of you and you lose control and you lose your calmness, that situation is just going to get worse. And your teammates or your family, whatever the case might be, depend on you not to lose control. And that's the way I feel about that.
I think it's so interesting too, because I think that like we're not taught to stay calm. You know, we are people get reactive, and now like with social media, people are doing a lot of reactivity stuff. Like, oh wow, I saw this video about this guy the other day, and he jumped on a table and started screaming something in a restaurant for content. And I was sitting there going, looking at my daughter. I was like, really? But like one of the things too is I think that what I try to do, and for my daughter and for my nephews, we put them in a martial arts class. She's been training Muay Thai, and a couple of reasons. It was that was that Mike Tyson quote that says everything's going fine until like you have a plan until you get hit punched in the face. And then like everyone's got a plan, but then yeah, wow, that sucks, and then you're out of it. But the other day we were doing, and my daughter was doing some sparring, and I could see her like pop, she got popped. And she turned and like afterwards, like she was like, wow, I had never dealt with something like that. And I got really freaked out. And I said, okay. And she's like, what should I do next time? And I said, just try not to get freaked out because it's going to happen again and again and again. And just stay calm. Keep your hands up. Whatever you do, keep your hands up right in front of you and like block those punches. Whatever you do, don't drop your hands. And one of the things too that she started doing it more, and the more she started sparring with, headgear, protective gear on and such, she started getting more comfortable with the challenge. And it's interesting too, because a lot of people think Navy SEALs are just built different. But like, were you always that way? Do you think these people are always that way? Or was that mindset something that you had to develop and that a lot of SEALs develop over time?
Well, I love what you're doing with your daughter with self-defense training because she's learning so much more than just self-defense. And she's learning what pain does and how to try to prevent that from occurring and how to protect yourself. She's learning all those great things. But then also, I think she's learning that she can be attacked. And so as far as the SEAL philosophy and the SEAL ethos and how we feel about that, everyone has a slightly different story on how they develop that mindset. We call it a combat mindset. I believe mine pretty much started way before I was even in the military. I just had something in me that wanted to be stressed and wanted to be scared, really, and wanted to be challenged physically and in any way you can think about it. I just had that urge for that. And then when you tie that in with a sense of patriotism and a sense of wanting to do a lot of physical activity, the SEAL program is the only thing that made sense for me to do. It was the best decision in my life to do that. But we all have different reasons why we develop that mindset, that combat mindset. But I think the important part is that we do develop it. And a lot of folks, like thanks to you and people do what you do, we get to have platforms where we can talk about it. And, it's not just SEALs, it's any military force, really. Or if you're a mountaineer or a race car driver or something, when you talk about pushing to the limits, I believe we all have it in us to want to push ourselves, but some of us just barely tap into those limits. And I think of Reinhold Messner quite a bit. He's one of my mentors, and he's the first person to climb Mount Everest without oxygen, the first to summit solo, and he's climbed all the toughest mountains in the world. He's considered the world's greatest mountaineer. So he. I've done over 1,000 competitions, extreme endurance competitions. But if I showed him my list, he would look at it and he'd smile probably. Said, "Yeah, I see you like running around in the parks." Well, what I do, I take a backpack, I put it on, I tell my family and friends, I'll be back in a couple of months. I'm going to climb a mountain that's never been climbed. I'm doing it solo without oxygen. I should be back in a couple of months. And and so like all the rest of us who climb mountains, none of us are like that. He can reach so far down deep in his gut and he can reach and pull everything out. And I think a lot of people, generation after generation after generation, I think we keep getting softer, barely
Right?
touching the source. And I think people like him is a great inspiration for the rest of us on how far we can push ourselves and to be inspired by people like that. And I think that all helps develop the combat mindset.
I think some people don't realize, a lot of people don't realize how far they can go or how much they can take. For many years, I got really sick a long time ago. And afterwards, one of the side effects is I developed these really bad food allergies. And it's really wild that the last year they've kind of abated. It's been very wonderful, but for a long time, for about 13 years, all I could eat was rice and beans and some simple vegetables. That was it. And people go, "Oh, that's so horrible. That's so awful." And, when I would fly, like, I would prepare food, and if I'm traveling, from Asia to the US and I had a, 36-hour flight with a 12-hour layover, I didn't eat the second flight. And people go, "Oh, it's so horrible for you." I just learned to be strong, to be tougher, to be able to deal with it. And, like, I at one point in time, one of the things that people said, like, "You must miss all this stuff." And I was like, as I've been able to enjoy some of those foods again, I still found that, one of my favorite things is a glass of sparkling water. Like, because that was one of the few things that I could have. And they're like, "Well, you don't miss this?" And no, I don't. Because I learned that I could function on less, I could thrive on less, and that what I everyone thought was essential was actually unnecessary, and that joy could be found in the simplest of things. For me, when I had those extreme food allergies, a nice cool bottle of sparkling water was something that brought me a lot of joy. And it was interesting too because, when you are able to recognize that you don't need all that. When I was doing martial arts, I still do martial arts, but, when I was early on in my training and I'm sitting there training with this guy 3 times my size. And, like, my teacher's like, "Now you gotta throw him." And one of the things my teacher had was a rule that we cannot use the word "can't" in class. And if you say the word, "I can't do that," someone they would throw you. Like, and so he says, "Whatever you do, you have to use the word can." And it might be hard. You might have to adapt the throw, but you can do it. And I was just sit there and at first I was soft like the rest. And then now, I've gotten tougher. I go I'm kind of annoying at the gym. A couple of the guys they laugh at me, but I try to push everyone. So when I go to run, I train at the same time as my daughter. And I don't train to be a professional fighter. That's not where I'm at right now. But I go and I work out. My daughter's there. And when I notice her and her friends slacking, I get on their case. And you're a slacker, McFly. Every time use the word slack, I slack it. I think of that. But when they're there, like, I'm 48 and I'm running laps around these kids, and they're just all like, "Oh," and I'm just like, "Come on, guys, you guys are like 20 something years old and your cardio's not there. Get running, keep running." And, like, with my daughter, when she gets, tired and she and her friends are laying on the ground, and I look at her, this is something my judo teacher taught me because with judo, you get thrown on the ground. My teacher would look at me and say, "Hey, yeah, what's up?" He said, "Can you stand?" And I'm like, "Yeah, but I'm tired." "Can you stand?" I said, "Yes, I can stand." And he says, "Then get your butt up off the floor and stand up." And that's something that always stuck with me because, like, if you have that potential, there is someone out there who would love to be standing in your place. And if you're not aware of that, it's one of the best things that you can become aware of is that, every single day I have an amazing wife and she is stunning, she is talented, she is beautiful. And I am very careful and I work very hard because I know that someone could take my place really fast, really easy. She could have anyone she wanted, you know? And that pushes me to be tougher. It pushes me to be stronger and it pushes me to try more. you know?
That's nice. Yeah, that's really nice. You know, you that cliche, say what you're saying about can and can't. It's so simple. We've all heard it a million years, but I believe it. If you say you can't do something, you're right. You can't do it. But if you can say you can, you'll find a way to make it happen, and you can do it. So I like
Yep.
what he told you. Don't say the word can't because you'll be correct and you won't be able to do it. I love that.
Yeah, 100%. But it leads me to ask you this question because I think that what I'm talking about is just those limits that we're pushed to. And when you're pushed to your absolute limit, like either physically, and again, not everyone's getting pushed to their limits physically nowadays, but they are getting pushed pretty hard mentally. You know, what actually keeps you going in that moment?
You know, I was an extreme ultra distance runner, and I love the furthest I ran without a break was 63 miles, and it really made me happy that I could push myself that hard without taking a break. Once I did this 2 Ironmans in one day. I was doing the early Ironman triathlons back when the Ironman first started. And an Ironman triathlon's a 2.4 mile swim, 112-mile bike ride, then a 26.2 mile run. So I was doing those and I loved them. And then when I retired from the teams, I was thinking, well, before I was in the teams, I used to do Ironman competitions. And I used to do them in less than 12 hours. So when I got out of the teams, I thought, well, now I'm going to try to do if I could do one under 12 hours, my retirement gift to myself is I'm going to do two in one day. And so it's a 4.8 mile swim and 224-mile bike ride, then a 52.4 mile run. And the swim went okay, that's fine in the water. And then the 224 miles on the bike, your legs get tired, of course, and you get sore and you're bent over and your elbows hurt, and you see everything hurts. But then you don't feel like running 2 marathons, you know? And, so the first marathon went by, it was okay, and then at mile 32, I was thinking all I have left is a marathon, that's all I have left. But my mindset at the time was, "Just a marathon, how simple is that?" Where a few years before that, I was, a marathon was a pretty big deal, but now it's just a small part of this race. But at mile 32, I started seeing the white stars and things were blurry. I started spitting up some bile, and I was wobbling, and then I passed out. And I was on the side of the course there, and the bikers were going by and the runners, but I was passed out on the lawn. And I opened up my eyes, and I was wondering why I was sleeping outside. And then I realized, my God, I'm in this double Ironman. I better get up and finish. So I wiped the bile off my face, and I got oriented and went off and finished and got the medal. And it dawned on me that any time before that in my life, any time where I thought something was too hard or too challenging or this is just too much, I was wrong because in that double Ironman, it taught me when it actually was too tough and too difficult, too challenging for me, I didn't quit because my mind was stronger than my body. I didn't quit, but my body needed a break to the point where it passed out. So I passed out, got the break I needed, and got up and finished. So I never believe anything's too tough or too hard unless you get to the point of your body just giving up on you for a while. And I went through probably 25 or so years, at least once a month, pushing myself to the point of hallucinations, passing out, or bleeding. It sounds insane, but I just never wanted to leave anything at home or left it on the table. I wanted to give it my all, whatever I was doing physically. And then I realized that we have this line, this imaginary line. And if we go over the line, that means you're not leaving anything behind. You're giving it your all. So that's the point where I start hallucinating or bleeding or passing out or something. And I would push SEALs this hard. I would push mountaineers this hard and triathletes this hard and adventure racers that hard. I always push people with that as the goal. You got to go over that line. Don't leave anything at home. And I realized a few years back that I was wrong in doing that because I almost killed myself twice by pushing too hard. And now I realize there's a much smarter way, and that is you still identify what the line is. If you're a piano player and all you're doing is playing the piano and you're giving up on your marriage, maybe your kid neglecting your kid and not doing anything outdoors physically, that's going over the line. So if you go over the line and whatever you do, something else is going to break down. And in my case, physically, I was pushing myself too hard physically. So my body was breaking down those 2 times. But now I think you still identify that line. Don't go, just come up and touch it and then back up. Come back up and touch it and back up. Be careful not to go over it. So you're not going to hurt your body, yourself, your relationships, your family, other things you do in your life. But that took me over 25 years to absolutely not to push too hard.
I mean, I can't even imagine running that much. And it's like, and you did this a lot. But as you're doing this, I mean, people talk a lot about discipline, but not always about identity. Like you identified as someone that was resilient and disciplined and could do it. Like how much of resilience comes down to who you believe you are? Because I mean, I'm gonna tell you the truth. I don't think, and that's right there. I don't think I could run a triathlon, but I haven't done it yet. I haven't trained for it yet. But my mindset is already turned off. How do you turn it on to believe that you can do something?
Well, I used to be very intimidated and unsure of myself, and thinking, "Who am I? Why do I think I can compete with these people?" And whatever the sport might be, and then, um, I just focused so much on the endeavor I was pursuing. I f I focused so much. I did a lot of visualizations, how hard it was gonna feel like, how hard it was gonna be. I did a lot of visualization. For instance, going through Bart SEAL training, I pictured how cold the water would be, how long those runs were gonna be, doing those sit-ups on the cement, instructors yelling, how hard that would be. So a lot of visualization I did. You know, every day is what I thought about. Every time I trained, it was to get ready for BUD/S, a SEAL training. So then when it worked, just thinking about it and thinking about it in the way that I thought about everything that I could think about from what I knew about BUD/S. I thought about it so much that, okay, it's gonna be cold water. Okay, it's gonna be really, really cold. Oh boy, it's gonna be so cold, my teeth are gonna be chattering so much, my fingers are gonna be blue, but I still gotta keep going. So I visualized it worse than it was. So when it came to going to BUD/S, and it's in my 20s, I was so ready, I thought physically, because I pushed myself so hard for 4 years preparing for it. And I didn't have a backup plan. There were no backup plans. My only plan was to go to become a SEAL. And I think if you have a backup plan, it's usually looks a little bit better once you get through some struggle because they're hammering me. We might say, oh, maybe I should have been a pilot or something else. But in SEAL training, the visualization and thinking about pursuing a goal, like for instance, if you ever wanted to do a triathlon, um, all you if you just thought about it and visualized it a little bit, you would do it for sure. You'd have to want it, of course. But for me, for birds, what happened is every day, I made sure I did that. Came back to my barracks room, my rack there. I was thinking, okay, today was tough. It was a tough day, but it wasn't as tough as I thought it would be. Buds was much easier for me than I thought it would be because I did all that visualization and thinking about how hard it was going to be. And I love this state of flow. And, Bach, Beethoven, Mozart used a state of flow. Sometimes they'd lock themselves in a room for 2 or 3 days, not eat or drink water, and they'd paint or they'd compose music, and they're in the state of flow. And I was working with bankers, teaching the state of flow, where first thing you do is you clear off your desk, you turn off your phone, you don't let anyone come in your door, and you get completely obsessed with what you're doing. And you don't and that way, if you have 1 hour of being in a state of flow, it might equal to 4 or 5 hours of constant disruptions and everything else that might prevent you from focusing on your goal of what you're pursuing. And without knowing that term "state of flow," I got there, every day, and I got that my state of flow was in long runs and long bike rides and long paddles and long swims. Get into a state of flow where nothing else mattered. I didn't feel the pain. I just was enjoying every aspect of what I was pursuing. And I think for anybody, if they get into the state of flow and doing whatever they do, it makes it so much more enjoyable. You get to you know, you have the chance, you have the ability of of reaching your full potential in whatever you're doing. But if you don't, if you just never reach that point of state of flow and you're down here and you're just making ends meet and you're doing this just to check the box, okay, I got that done, I got that done. You never get close to finishing all that you can do in life. And the my biggest my regret that I saw in the civilian population when I retired from the SEAL teams, but when I retired from SEAL teams, I went to the CIA for 25 years. But even then, even with those agency people, it wasn't like the teams. And the biggest thing I saw is people, they set their goals low, they achieved them, and they were happy with themselves. They never pushed hard. Um, every everybody I talked to, I look at it and go, "Wow, that's as far as you're gonna go? You have a bicycle store, and this is all you're gonna do. I mean, you're not gonna pursue and make it bigger or greater or expand, or you're a runner, and this is all you're gonna do." It seems like, in my opinion, most of the people I met, they set the goals low and they achieved them and they were happy with it. So I was positive I was not gonna let that happen to myself, and I or my friends if I could help it.
I love it because it's like we we all exist in a box, right? Maybe you the box that you existed in was your family identified. Well, we walk 10 steps a day. We're the 10-step-a-day family. And then your family across the street is the 20-step-a-day family. And then the family up the street is the 50-step-a-day family. And I'm just picking a really random thing. But like everyone exists where they're at. And that 10-step-a-day family can't even comprehend what it's like to be the 50-step-a-day family. And I mean, we're talking about a random steps, right? But that might be workouts, that might be finances, that might be, money, it might be health, it might be wellness, it could be all of these different things of that family. It's just this idea of being able to envision a more potential for yourself, you know? And I think that one of the things that I find is interesting is that when you surround yourself by people who have this newer, this fuller picture of themselves, they can help you see more potential. They can help you see, yeah, you can do that. Like right now, I told you, I would love to do a triathlon. I don't know where to start, but if I meet triathlon people and I start hanging out with them and they're like, hey, come on a ride with us, come on a swim with us, come on a run with us, I'm pretty sure that I could pull it off. I just need to get around the people that can help me get there. And I think one of the things to do is like, you got to find the people that can help you shift your mindset or start finding the outlets to shift your mindset in another way.
Yeah, yeah. And, that 10-step, 20-step, 50-step families, I started saying this earlier and I distracted myself. But what I would do is I'd get in these races, 5Ks, 10Ks, things like that. And initially I'd think, wow, why, how do, is there any reason in the world I feel like I should be competing against these people? They're all better than I am. They're all faster. Really, the marathons and triathlons is where I started thinking, like, look at all these great people. I have no right to be in with them. And then as my mindset started getting stronger, I started thinking, well, why should I let anybody pass me? I'm not going to let people pass me. And then why do I have people in front of me? I'm going to do everything I can to beat those people in front of me. Excuse me. And then it became to the point, well, I'm going to give everything I can to win this thing. And of course, I wasn't going to win a marathon or things like that, but that's how I thought, and it helped me out a lot. And I l- and I'm st- I, d- I did a 10K. I've done two in the past couple weeks, and my lungs got injured when I was up on Everest, and so I have scar tissue in my lung tissue now. I got HAPE and HACE. I almost died on Everest about 9 years ago,
Oh,
and
wow.
I don't have any regrets at all. Though I didn't want to be the person who said I should have tried it. I could have tried it. I was saved by the world's most famous surf. All in all, it was a great experience. But
That's awesome.
my times are all slower now because of the scar tissue in my lungs. Now it just gives me a new goal. Now my goals are to try to beat the times I had before Everest, and it gives me something to chase. And then when I look at my heart rate and my zones on my watch after the race, I go, man, I gave 111% on that race. I gave so just knowing you're giving it your all, no matter where you are in the placing of the race. Um, I just love that feeling. You're giving it your all. And the last race I did was a 5K and a 10K and half marathon, all in the same. Everyone started together, and we all. So you don't really know who's in the 5K or 10K. I'm 68 years old. I was hoping I did okay in my age group. I won first overall with a
That's
slow
awesome.
time, with a slow time. And this, not to get off track,
No.
but that's not saying anything good about me. I think it's saying something poor about this generation. The
Mm,
times today, just as an example, running times, the times that we used to do, they would blow the times away today. Now winning, you're doing like slow mileage, and that's just in your typical neighborhood 10Ks. People are much slower now. They don't push themselves as hard. They don't train as hard, and I don't think there's enough focus or commitment to pushing yourself hard enough to get something done. And that run was just an example.
I completely agree. I think that we're soft on ourselves at times. I think that we don't really lean into our potential. You think about that. How many people could be absolutely amazing at what they're doing, real leaders in their field or in their profession or whatever, but they don't get there because they pull back. My daughter was having this experience. I'm going to kind of change gears here, but it's still the same thing. She's been learning to put her contacts in. One of the things I notice is that she gets it close, she taps the eye, and then she pulls it back. And I say, Alani, you're not going all the way. They said, no, I did. I touched it and it didn't. And I said, you're not going all the way. So she's getting in and pulls back. And finally, she was doing it one time and I was helping her and I went, pop, just tapped her finger. She's like, and contact was right in. And she's like, why did you do that? I said, because you had the potential to do more and you couldn't see it. And one of the things too is I think that so many of us start leaning on our potential. We hit that discomfort and we pull back. And I think that is a dangerous thing when you hit that discomfort and you pull back because it's not pain. It's not something that it's just the unknown. And I wanted to ask you, how do you think people can start getting beyond that space?
I don't want to sound like a sickie or a masochist or anything. I don't think pain is a bad thing. I don't think
Mm,
it's a bad thing at all. I think a little discomfort, a little pain, whatever you want to call it, is needed to push your boundaries.
yeah.
We have boundaries, and that keeps us in that comfort zone. And to break out of those boundaries is going to cause some discomfort or pain. And
Mm-hmm.
I like to welcome the pain. And I
Mm-hmm.
have that as my motto all the time. I welcome the pain, not to be
Mm,
cocky or arrogant or anything, but look at this mountain, or look at this 500-mile, 10-day adventure race, or look at SEAL training or anything. You look at it as a huge, huge goal, and you don't think that you're not bragging or pounding your chest or anything like I'm going to go do that. It's just inside you're thinking, okay, this is going to hurt. It's going to be worth
mhm.
doing, but anything worth doing, it's okay to get some discomfort or pain. So I like to welcome the pain. And then
Yeah.
when you finish whatever that endeavor might be, and you finish putting in the work or the pain involved in getting it done, when that's done, that feeling is so much better than where you were before the pain came. And so,
Right.
yeah, you put yourself through a little pain, you break your boundaries, you're reaching up a little beyond your boundaries, and now you're in a better place, and now you're out of the pain, and you're more comfortable because you've accomplished something bigger, and now it's time to look for the next, what I call macro goal. It's gonna hurt, I'm gonna go for it, and just I believe there's 2 types of pain, though,
Talk to me
and,
about that.
yeah, so and it's not just some tough guy T-shirt saying or anything. But would always say pain is good, pain's extremely good, but that's just tough guy talk. I believe 2 types of pain.
Hmm.
And one is just by having the discipline to push yourself beyond your boundaries. And that might
Yep.
be a little pain, might be a little comfort, but you're going to get further than where you are right there without that pain. That's just a little bit of pain. And once you reach it, it's all over. But the worst type of pain, the pain of regret, is if you decide
Mm.
not to push yourself, stay in this little comfort zone, not to go after this, not to go after that project, not to put in for this job assignment, not to go climb that mountain, not to go do that triathlon. That pain is pain of regret, and the pain of regret is permanent and will last the rest of your life. And it's going to hurt your psyche and your ego and what you think about yourself. Like, I never tried. I should have done that. I could have. I would have. I did. I should have done it. And I think that's a terrible thing. Like for Everest, for me, I didn't summit. And my friends would all say to me that, "Oh my God, you must feel terrible. You must feel terrible you didn't summit." I said, "No, I mean, I feel so much better that I tried. I gave it my all. I passed out on the ice field and I had to be brought down to base camp, but it wasn't a conscious decision. I was unconscious. I didn't give up, but I knew if I had stayed on that, well, I learned later, if I had stayed on the mountain longer, or if I was any higher, I would have died. I came pretty close to it anyways. So I don't have any regrets. My worst regret would have been that permanent pain of regret that would have lasted the rest of my life. Like, oh, I wish I did it back then. I could have done it back then, and have some excuse why you don't. That pain is way worse than a little bit of pushing the envelope and feeling some discomfort.
I think that's huge. And it leads to my next question because, like, in your experience, what separates people who make it through some of those extreme challenges from the ones who quit?
Well, for the mountaineering, high altitude mountaineering, you're rolling the dice, really. I mean, weather could take the best mountaineer off the mountain and kill him. HAPE and haze is what I got, the high altitude pulmonary edema and high altitude cerebral edema. Nobody knows why that happens to some people. Sir Edmund Hillary, first person to summit Everest, he got it. And nobody knows why people get it. But high altitude pulmonary edema is when your lungs fill with fluid. All of a
That's
sudden, you're
not
just
cool.
choking and coughing and fluids coming out of your mouth and nose. And cerebral edema is when your brain cavity, the space between the lining and the cavity, fills with fluid, and then the pressure puts pressure on your brain, and you start losing cognitive skills, and you can't think clearly. So what had happened to me is climbing the this was the worst place, and it was the most dangerous, the Kumba Ice Falls, and I was climbing this ladder, vertical ladder, little cable ladder, and sometimes you go horizontal across these ladders and you look down and see like what you think is the center of the earth. And these ladders shake and wobble and everything. But I was ready for these, I was looking forward to it. And I was climbing up this ladder. And the girl on our team, Lydia Bradley, she goes, Don, you're the oldest one on our team, but this doesn't bother you, does it? You're not having any problems. And she summited 7 times. I said, no, knock on wood. I'm feeling good. So I went from feeling good to climbing this ladder. I started feeling some symptoms, but all of a sudden, when I was putting my head down, fluid was just coming out my nose and mouth, and I couldn't figure out why. And then it started getting dark, but it wasn't getting dark. The pressure in my brain shut out my night vision. I couldn't see anymore. I lost my vision. So it looked like it was nighttime, although it was daytime. And then I didn't know where I was when I was climbing this ladder, which is challenging, physically challenging. I was thinking, "Where am I?" So I lost my memory and my vision, and when I put my head down, this fluid was I was drowning in my lungs is what it is. My lungs were 75% filled with water, and so there wasn't room for air, so I couldn't get my breath. But instinctively, I knew I had to finish climbing that ladder to the top of the ice cliff, and when I got there, I passed out, and, Andrei George Sherpa, the Sherpa most known to the world of mountaineering. He saved so many lives up there. He was the star of the movie Into Thin Air and Into the book. He's just a great guy. I became good friends with him. I have so much respect for that man. But when I opened my eyes, he was on our team. He looked at me. He says, "Can you walk?" I said, "Yep," because he's seen a lot of people die with Hape and haste, and he saved some of those people. He couldn't save them all. So he put his oxygen mask on my mouth, and I put my hand on his shoulders, trying to make it down to this rappel site, but I had to keep taking his mask and get all the fluid out because it was just filling with fluid. And I was passing out along the way. He thought I was gonna die. Everybody did actually. Nobody thought I would make it. And I couldn't even think enough to wonder what I had. I didn't even know what I had at that time because my brain wasn't working properly. And then we got to this 100 to 150-foot ice wall, and he said, "Can you rappel?" My inner voice was saying, "Of course I can rappel. I've rappelled all my life." But it was dark still, even though it was daylight. I just thought it was dark because it was pitch black. So he rappelled on, and I had my harness on, my rappel device, and I got the rope in my hand. I've rappelled thousands of times, and I was looking at the rope and my harness, and I thought, I forgot how to rappel because the pressure on my brain, it just really caused a lot of problems. And but that morning, I think it was that morning, I saw a Sherpa wrap the climbing line around his arm like a bunch of times, 8 or 10 times or something. And he went off the wall just releasing one loop at a time, and he made it down. And I was thinking, well, I have to get down. I remember seeing the Sherpa do that. They just wrapped the rope around my arm a bunch of times. And I went off the cliff, just releasing one loop off my arm at a time. And I made it down to the bottom. I luckily had enough loops in. And then we eventually made it down to base camp, which is 21,000 feet or so. And, um, and they put me in a tent and they said, "We got to get you off the mountain today. You have to get up this mountain." And they called this doctor over and she said, "I've never heard anybody's lungs with so much fluid in them." And I couldn't talk still. I was just coughing and choking. And they put me in a tent. And when you're really sick up there, you want to be isolated because you don't want people to hear you coughing and choking. And, it's just, you don't want a real sick person next to all the healthy climbers. So you get put in a tent far away from everybody, which is what I wanted anyways, because I didn't like all the coughing noises I was making. I was just choking nonstop. Then the helicopter couldn't come in that day or the next day, and everyone was, like, almost saying goodbye to me. They didn't think it was gonna work. And then, a Swedish helicopter pilot flew up, and this is on Discovery Channel TV, they filmed it all, and, on Everest rescues, they filmed my rescue, and he said, "I'm not acclimatized. I'm coming up here to save some people. I don't have any oxygen, but I can take you back down Kathmandu." So, he saved my life also. So I got in this helicopter. We just went down that mountain for an hour, and I'm still recovering, but no regrets at all. I don't have that permanent pain and regret. I went out. My body said no more. I had nothing to say about that. I had to too. I was unconscious, but the temporary pain of the discipline you have to push yourself through some boundary. You don't have to go to the extreme of Everest, but you can push your boundaries and make them up, open them up little by little, little by little. And then I think it's us as fathers, we both have daughters. I feel a responsibility to make sure my daughter thinks that way too. I don't want to do anything that's going to hurt her, but I don't want to stay in a little bubble where her boundaries are going to be secluded and just isolated and she doesn't see what else there is in life for her.
One of the things too is teaching my daughter that it's okay to look at her goals and to figure out what are the ones that she wants, but then the goals that are important to her to like not quit, to lean in on that there are some things that are important enough to keep going. I sit there and when we train Muay Thai, like a couple of the fighters, one of the fighters came up to me and he says, "You're older," and like they were kind of cracking up, like, "We know we can beat you, but like you push harder than anyone in here." And I was like, "Yeah," and they're like, "Why?" I was like, you guys are the better fighters. You guys are trained. But like, if we went up in the ring and my daughter was over there in the corner, you better believe I'm giving you hell, because I have this, I'm not going to, you're gonna be like, stay down. And I'm not, because if my kid's over there, I'm not staying down. There's nothing that's going to be, and, it's like, and I think that again, you have to, um, think about what is the reason that you're getting back up. Why are you continuing to push yourself? It's much easier to lay down and quit when you don't have a reason. You know what I mean? But if you have a reason to stand back up again, then it makes it much easier. And you've written a lot of books. You've got these shows, you've got these creative interests. How do you take the lessons from extreme environments and apply them to everyday life? Because maybe someone's not going to be on Everest, but they're dealing with their own challenges. How can they use some of these things to help themselves?
Well, I think that's another good thing that you just brought out about whatever. Some people don't think Everest is extreme because even though it's the tallest mountain in the world, it's not the toughest. K2, the second tallest, is way more difficult than Everest. And climbers I know who've climbed K2, they said their feeling is, well, we don't like wasting our time on Everest. We're not going to go there.
Mhm.
You want a challenge, go to K2, So I think it's all relative on how you define extreme or pushing way beyond the boundaries. But as long as it's beyond the boundaries and you're pushing a little bit beyond, what happens, I think, to people, I really feel firmly in this. If you push yourself beyond the boundaries, then when you come back to everyday normal life and there's a hiccup and something goes wrong, or there's a little challenge that happens, you're okay with that because you've already gone
Mhm.
beyond that in your experiences or your training. You've gone beyond that and you're calm, kind of like you talked about the motorcycle accident. You're just calm because, yeah, I've been through this situation and much, much worse. This is a little hiccup in my life. There's an answer to it. And it's not that difficult and life's gonna go on. And I don't know who first came up with this saying. I know John Lennon, the Beatles, used to say it. I think about it quite often. He said, "Everything's gonna be okay in the end. If it's not okay, it's not the end. So
Mm.
just keep pursuing what you're doing, and it's gonna be okay. And hopefully you'll find the best solution to make it okay, but it's gonna be okay." And, I think that's how I feel about that.
I love that. If people want to find out more about you and what you do, where should they look?
Well, probably the website, usfrogman.com, and, it's USFROGMANN, like my last name, .com. And then I'm hosting some TV shows. Those are listed on that website, and the books I write are on the website, and the talking, things I do, the speaking, that's all on the website. But and your podcast will be on the website.